Okay, hey everybody, this is Ari in the Air. Welcome back to the channel. Stoked you're here today. I've got a very technical video about how to fly a two-liner and avoid taking big collapses. Okay, there's some very specific things that are design characteristics of two-liners that you absolutely have to understand so that you can safely fly these things. Okay, let's get right into it.
I'm paragliding!
See ya. Okay, if you are trying to learn how to fly two-liners, that you eventually want to move to a two-liner, or you're currently flying them, you definitely need to understand this. And before we get started, I want to invite you to the Spring Tuneup. It's a live online paragliding course that I'm doing. I designed it to help you maximize your progression and minimize accident, injury, and burnout this season. It's live and online. It's 3 sessions. Links in the description below. And I also want to tell you guys that I am, in fact, going back to Italy, doing more cross-country clinics this year in Bassano del Grappa and in the Dolomites. So if you are looking to learn how to fly cross-country, then come to Bassano with us. And if you're flying cross-country already and you want to do an advanced mountain thermaling clinic, maybe even with some top landing vol-biv shit, then links in the description. Check it out. Okay, so let's get right into this. So simply put, there is a design element of a two-liner that makes it different than three-liners. Okay, that is that with a two-liner, you only have 2 risers, you have A's and B's, and so when you pull down in the A's, the glider hinges on the B's. Okay, it hinges on the B's. That means that as you pull down on the A's, the tail gets further from you. Right? As you pull down in the A's, the tail gets further from you, and because of this, the brake lines on two-liners have to be extra long. And it's not something that you can avoid. You can't shorten the brake lines on a two-liner to resolve this because that would defeat the purpose. Basically, the brake lines on a two-liner have to be extra long because as the tail of the glider gets further from you, it would pull the brakes, which would cause 2 problems. One is that would be the brakes and the gas. It would be very inefficient. But another thing that you need to know is that when you're flying more than half speed on a two-liner, if you pull on the brake will collapse the glider. That is because as you pull the A's and the glider gets steeper, if you pull the brakes actually create an area on the glider that will create an upward force, and it actually just tilts the glider further forward. Okay, it's typically a sharp brake input at more than half speed, and the glider will collapse. I've done this actually on full speedbar, racing into goal against Chris Cote at the US Open. We're side by side. I was on full speed, and I had this big piece of turbulence that I flew through, and I went to pull on the rear riser, and my hand slipped off the rear riser, and I banged the brake accidentally, and it just collapsed the glider so quickly. It caught me so off guard. I wasn't even able to come off the speed bar before it reinflated, so it shot on the speed bar. It shot so hard that it broke the harness. Okay, it's a bad thing. Don't do it. Can't pull the brakes when you're in a speed bar. That's the first thing you need to know. Second thing is that because the brakes are long, it changes the flying characteristics of like physically how you touch the glider. So on a three-liner, you used to be in flying up here, active piloting, but on my Enzo, like my hands are down here, which it took me a while to get used to this, but after a while, I actually really enjoy it. My hands stay warmer. My hands don't need to move as far. It kind of changes the muscles that you need to fly the glider, yada, yada. But the most important thing that you need to know about the two-liner and the brakes is that when you go from the rear risers to the brakes, because the brake is so long, it is common that you have no connection to the glider for a brief moment. And my recommendation to you is that you really understand that and you start paying attention to whether or not you're touching the glider, like whether or not you're feeling connected to the pressure in the glider, either through the rears or through the brakes, and become very aware of the moments that you're not connected to the glider, okay? That means that if you're flying on the speed bar and you're using the rear risers, and if you come off of the speed bar and you go onto the brakes, if you come off the bar and you let go of the rears, then from the time that you let go of the rears to the time you pull the brakes down, get the bottom of the brake toggle, do a half wrap, and now you have brake pressure in your hands. That is time that you're not actually able to prevent collapses, catch shots, all these things, okay? I have a great video that demonstrates this, okay? This is from a guy named Will. He's a French pilot, and he's quite talented. Okay, so let's just watch at full speed here. Kind of a nightmare, right? The camera, the 360 cam, ends up in his lap, so it's kind of funny. But let's slow it down here. So like I said, when you're coming off the speed bar and you let go of the rears, there's a moment between the time you let go of the rears and the time you get brake pressure that you really want to avoid that time. You want to minimize that time. You want to be super aware of it, okay? That's not the only thing that happens in this video. I'm going to break down what happens in this collapse and how Will could have prevented it. So he's flying along. It looks like a banger day in the Alps, and he's under this little wisp. He's in lift, and he has a hold of the rear riser here on his right, and he pulls hard on the left brake, starting a left turn, okay? Which, as the wisps that you can see are above the glider, it seems like a good idea to be doing that. But what happens next is the glider starts turning left, which is a pretty big input on the left, and then it shoots forward, and at the same time, let's go back just a couple frames here. At the same time, you can see that he switches from the rear riser to the brake. And the first thing he does, he's got the bottom of the brake toggle in his hand. He pulls it almost all the way to his chest. You see that? But look at the trailing edge of the glider. There's hardly any deflection in the glider at all. So he's effectively not pulling on the brake whatsoever. He is currently in process of taking a half wrap. So the glider continues going forward. He brings his hand up to take the half wrap, which means that he's lowering tension on the brake line. 75% collapse, right? Is that 75? Maybe it's 80. That's the entire glider. Look, he's looking at the top surface of his glider. Which totally sucks. I mean, two-liners, in my opinion, are safer gliders to fly if you know how to fly them, but you really can't let them explode. But Xeno 2 just totally exploded right there. So to go back, what I would recommend Will to do here in this is this shot right here. It's just unlucky timing. Like, it's not because he's a bad pilot. He's a very talented pilot, but there's just like this unlucky timing that he has here, right? If he would have just caught this surge on the rear riser instead, this would have never happened. Also, he could have, instead of rushing to get a half wrap, instead of pulling the brake line towards his body, which kind of like limited how far he could pull it, he just bangs it, right? That would have done the trick as well, which is something that I do on the Enzo. Sometimes, like, if I realize that I don't have the rear riser, but I need brake right now, like, I'll just throw the brake as far down as I can get it, you know? He goes into a 180 line twist. The glider recovers itself mostly, and Will does a great job of not over controlling the glider. And I so appreciate Will for letting us use this video for learning. But I hope this goes to demonstrate that there is this moment between letting go of the rear riser and getting brake pressure that can be very dangerous on a two-liner. You got to be really cognizant of that. Minimize the time that you have between it's a transition. I have another friend who on an Enzo had a huge accident, and it was so lucky that he didn't die. And he had the same thing, just timing in transition. These transitional moments on these two-liners can be very, I wouldn't say that it's dangerous, but it's something you got to be really aware of. You got to have quick transitions. My recommendation for you, don't be afraid of the rear riser. Control the glider on the rear riser. Whether you're on the brakes or on the speed bar, the rear risers work super good. And just be super cognizant so that you transition really quickly from the rear riser to the brake. Sometimes I will go from the rear riser, I just go to the bottom of the brake just so I can feel brake pressure, and then I take a wrap from there. Okay. But all this stuff is stuff that if you want to fly a two-liner, it's really good to know because the two-liners are different than the three-liners, and there's these little things that you want to be aware of, okay? I hope that's helpful. If you want to fly better, further, safer, and enjoy it more, check out my offerings. I'm doing live online paragliding coaching, and I'm also doing cross-country clinics that are turning out to be super fucking dope, and we're having a really great time. You want to go on cross-country clinics with me because I have a great time, and I want to have a great time, and I want to spend my time with people who are thoughtful and talented. And so if that's you, then you should come to Italy with us. Check it out in the link. See you later.